The morning sun rose over the bleeding crags, casting long shadows across the jagged rocks. The faint glow of ether still lingered in the veins of the cliffs, but the oppressive presence of the shadow had lessened. The shard pulsed warmly against my chest, its light stronger than it had been in days. Lysara stood at the edge of the plateau, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. I joined her, my breath visible in the cold morning air. "That's it," she said, pointing toward a distant ridge. "The end of the crags. Beyond that the land begins to heal, but the shadow's influence will still be felt." I nodded, my gaze fixed on the horizon. "What lies beyond the crags?" "The verdant expanse," she said. "A land rich in ether, where the light thrives. But the shadow has begun to creep into its borders. If we are to rally the forces of light, that is where we must begin." The journey to the ridge was uneventful at first, the path winding through the last remnants of the crags. The whispers were faint now, more like distant echoes than the insistent voices I'd grown used to. "They're retreating," I said, glancing at Lysara. "For now," she replied, "but the shadow is not gone. It is waiting, watching. The quiet is merely a prelude to its next move." The shard pulsed faintly, its light a reassuring presence as we pressed on. As we reached the ridge, the landscape shifted dramatically. The jagged crimson cliffs gave way to rolling hills covered in vibrant green grass, dotted with patches of luminous wildflowers that glowed softly in the light. Streams of ether flowed freely through the land, their shimmering currents weaving between the hills like veins of light. "The verdant expanse," Lysara said, her voice tinged with both awe and caution. The air was warmer here, the hum of the ether steady and soothing. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe freely. But the peace was short-lived. As we descended into the expanse, a strange sound reached our ears, a low, rhythmic thrum, almost like a heartbeat. The shard pulsed in response, its light flickering slightly. "Do you hear that?" I asked, my grip tightening on the shard. Lysara nodded, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. "It's the shadow," she said. "It's using the ether's flows to anchor itself here." We followed the sound, weaving through the hills until we came to a wide, open field. At its center was a massive black obelisk, its surface slick and reflective, as though it had been carved from liquid shadow. Tendrils of darkness snaked out from its base, winding through the ether streams like roots, strangling a tree. "The obelisk is a conduit," Lysara said grimly. "The shadow uses it to corrupt the ether. If we destroy it, the light can begin to reclaim this place." "How do we destroy it?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "You," she said, turning to me. "The shard's light can sever the obelisk's connection to the ether. But it will not be easy. The shadow will defend its anchor with everything it has." As if on cue, the tendrils began to writhe, and from the ground emerged figures cloaked in shadow. They moved unnaturally, their forms flickering and shifting as they advanced. Lysara drew her blade, her expression fierce. "Hold them off while I prepare the shard's energy." She charged forward, her movements fluid and precise as she cut through the advancing creatures. I raised the shard, its light flaring as I summoned a barrier to protect her flank. The creatures were relentless, their attacks coming in waves. The ether here was strong, but the shadow's corruption made it harder to control. Each time I drew on the shard's power, it felt like pushing through thick mud. Lysara's voice cut through the chaos. "Nico, the obelisk!" I turned to see the obelisk glowing with a faint, malevolent light, its tendrils pulsing as though alive. I focused on the shard, its warmth surging through me as I channeled its energy. The light erupted from the shard, striking the obelisk's base. The tendrils recoiled, hissing like wounded animals, but they didn't retreat entirely. The obelisk's glow grew brighter, its surface rippling as if it were preparing to fight back. "You must keep going," Lysara shouted, fending off another wave of creatures. I gritted my teeth, pouring more of the shard's energy into the attack. The light struck the obelisk again, and this time, cracks began to form along its surface. The tendrils thrashed wildly, lashing out at me, but I raised a barrier just in time. With one final surge of energy, the shard's light pierced through the obelisk, shattering it into fragments. The tendrils dissolved and the shadow's presence faded, leaving the field bathed in the soft glow of the ether. The silence that followed was almost deafening. The creatures were gone, and the obelisk's remains lay scattered across the ground, their dark surface now dull and lifeless. "You did it," Lysara said, her voice filled with quiet relief. I collapsed to my knees, the shard dimming as it returned to its steady, comforting pulse. "Is it over?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "For now," she said, helping me to my feet. But this was only one anchor. The shadow will have others, stronger and more deeply rooted. As we set up camp in the now quiet expanse, I couldn't help but feel a mix of exhaustion and determination. The shadow was far from defeated, but today had been a victory, a small step toward reclaiming the light. The shard's warmth was a constant presence as I drifted off to sleep, its steady pulse a reminder that the fight wasn't over. Tomorrow, we would continue, and whatever the shadow had in store, we would face it together.